Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs, your award-winning Tottenham Hotspur podcast. We are back. We are in the midst of the closing of the January transfer window, of course, where, look, up until the last half an hour ago, and again, for our listeners on audio, this will mean absolutely nothing because you can be listening to this any time in the world. I mean, we've got a massive, obviously, fan base in Australia, Korea, wherever you are. We are getting some news to us, of course, over one transfer that over the weekend looked like it was off. It could potentially be back on. We'll bring absolutely more to that story, most certainly. But like I say, if you're listening to us for the first time, you can find us on iTunes. We're on Spotify. We're across all major audio platforms. We're, of course, on X. We are on Instagram. We are on Facebook too. We're joined by, look, yet again, he's a regular to Last Word on Spurs. I'll bring in the wonderful journalist we've got in a second. But joining me as always, got to say, Matt, we're coming towards the end of what's been a really, got to say, an enjoyable month. You know, I think we was all stunned that Spurs actually went quite early in the window, given we've been used to the fact Spurs have been fairly late in their business. But I think we've actually quite enjoyed this last month in terms of having great journalists on like the one we've got tonight and being able to decipher and understand really what it's been like behind the scenes at Spurs. And there could yet be yet another twist. Matty, how are you? Love to see you back alongside me.
Brilliant to be back. I was concerned when we'd confirmed both of our signings by the 12th of January that Ricky, we'd have no content for the month and we'd just be sitting here chatting with journalists about what they had for dinner and all that. But it's been a refreshing month in that we've been able to kind of dive a little bit more into the kind of the workings behind the transfer window and looking a bit more about the mood around Tottenham and what Postecoglou has built. So that's been absolutely fantastic. But at the end of the day, we're all here for transfer news, and I think the news breaking 5-10 minutes before we go live is exactly what it's all about. So I'm looking forward to getting more of that update.
Absolutely. Look, I've got to say, this man's been with us for the last 7-8 years. And when I say it's always genuinely a pleasure, it really, really is. And I think I joked with him off air that Sky are now making him grow out his moustache to try and see if they can wing out deadline to get as much content as they can, because it is a fine-looking moustache. It means it can only be the wonderful Lyall Thomas back with us. Lyall, lovely to have you back on, mate. You're smiling. How are you, mate? Lovely to have you join us. You well?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, of course I'm smiling. Someone's got to keep smiling, right? It's been a interesting, challenging transfer window for loads of reasons, which we'll get into. Obviously, not just it's been not as challenging, I don't think, for Spurs. I think they've done great business, but for the other clubs certainly. And so yeah, I've been growing the beard as a bit of a January transfer window dare to see how fluffy and bushy it can get between January the 1st and February the 1st. So we're getting there now. It's looking all right, I think. Not bad. That's the first time I've done it. So
absolutely. I'm glad, mate, you didn't shut me down when I said it could be wheeled out on deadline day as a story, the way it's been going this month. But look, I mean, I think that feeling around deadline day is that there always is maybe that feeling of expect the unexpected. So we'll definitely be asking you about what to maybe expect in the next week or so. I mean, there's only one place to start. And I think I've got to hand over to Matt, because this has been Matt's really, I'd say, man of the window that he's desperately wanted to see through the door. And, you know, given the last few days on, especially over the weekend, it looked like the deal to see Nusa to Spurs was dead. I'll come over to Matt to kick us off, and then Lyall will get some info from you. Matt, over to you, my man.
Yeah, look, I've said it quite a few times on here throughout the month that this is an exquisite footballer. He's only 18 years of age, but I think that the biggest compliment you can give him is at 18, he's been playing first team football for 2 years already, not regularly and not banging in 30 goals a season, but he's an absolutely fantastic player. He's got flair, he's got confidence, he's got pace, he's got everything I think that Spurs are perhaps lacking in a winger at the moment. And while he's not a signing for now, he very much will be a signing for the future. It's one that I'm really, really hyped to potentially see get done. But Lyall, what's the latest?
Well, yeah, as some people may have seen on social media just now and on Sky Sports News just now, we just broke that the deal for Antonio Nusa to Brentford is stalling. So there's some complications in that deal at the moment, and that's obviously potentially reopening the door to the other clubs who've been interested in him. And obviously, you know, one who we've reported on Sky, and one that you and I and Matt. Ricky have talked about on here already. You know, what was it, a week or so ago, maybe 10 days or so ago, yep. Which is Antonio Nusa. So yeah, listen, you said expect the unexpected. Well, here we are. I mean, we're not on transfer deadline day yet, but we've got a bit of the unexpected happening. You know, we still need to do more digging, more proper journalism on what the complications in the deal are, and you know what is going to happen next. You know, he could still go to Brentford. You know, Brentford did the deal over the weekend. They, from their point of view, did a great job in getting in front of the other clubs who were interested to get him, and we're quite confident over the weekend of seeing this through. But like as I said, there's some complications that have emerged now, and we'll see where it goes. He could still go to Brentford. He could stay at Bruges. Who knows? He could end up at Spurs or he could end up at Chelsea. I think it's open-ended again now, and we'll see over the next sort of hours and day or two, which way this is going to go. So, yeah, really interesting one. We needed, I think, an interesting one to ignite this window a little bit. So, the last week, the last few days usually throws up some jeopardy in this way, and I think we're starting to see it.
It was going to be a player that we were going to cover during this window because, again, with you look, 10, 11 days ago, there I think at the time was a bit of reported interest about Spurs looking to get that deal over the line. It went quiet for a period. Obviously, we heard the news over the weekend that it looked like Brentford were in pole position. I just wonder from your perspective, and again, we know obviously circumstances are going to change potentially. I must say the word potentially because, again, with the window, we all know expect the unexpected. But what was your feeling when that news was coming through that potentially the player was favouring, or the fact Brentford did move into pole position over Spurs? Do you feel that would have been a huge loss? And again, he may still be a Spurs player. What's your gut feeling on the potential of the player?
Well, I think the potential, the first thing to say is the potential of the player is huge. Obviously he's still very young, and he's been playing in the Belgian league, but, he's been playing a lot. He's been, around the national setup and things like that as well. So the potential is there. That's why these clubs, clubs the size of Spurs, Chelsea and Brentford have been trying to get him in. Listen, we know how great Brentford's recruitment has been over the years, what great talent spotters they've got there. They pick the right players, and they've shown they've picked the right players over, consistently over a number of windows. So, even though Brentford are where they are in the league, that's nothing really compared to, the talent spotters that they've got there. That's really a sign of the potential of the player. They obviously think he's got huge potential. In Spurs too, and Chelsea have had a bit of an interest as well. So we know that Chelsea are looking to bring in young players with high potential as well. That is their remit. That's their their model at the moment. So the potential is big. I think that obviously playing time has been important to the player, and I think that he was impressed with probably what Brentford were offering him. Especially in terms of playing time, and that was what we understood to be why he was favouring a move to there at the time. So, and they could assure him of the game time even next season if he, once he arrives. I think that they were open to allowing him to stay on loan. We know Bruges have wanted to keep him on loan. They've been saying so publicly and privately that, okay, we'll negotiate a deal for him now and we'll agree a deal now, but he has to stay with us until the summer. I know Spurs were okay with that, being the deal as well. So, listen, let's see where it goes from now. It's so open ended and up in the air all of a sudden that it's going to be a fascinating couple of days, I think.
Matty, we did not ask you your opinion on it, given the fact that you've been obviously very heavily so interested in seeing the player ply his trade in N17. Matt, the feeling that potentially maybe, and again, maybe because again, it's the window, it can all change. He may be in a position where he could still move to Tottenham. How does it make you feel, Matt?
Yeah, look, it's encouraging, of course. I said it the other day after the news broke that it did look like he was going to go to Brentford, that I wasn't as frustrated as I expected because it was, it seemed to be a choice on the player's side. He wanted the game time, and it's not something that, Spurs messed up, I suppose. But if it's back on the table, I'm really excited. And look, I completely get what you're saying, Ricky, and I do agree with you to some extent that it'd be much better to bring in players for the now, but with what we're building at the moment and some of the players we've already brought in for the future, like Luka Vuskovic, you would forget is going to be coming in a year and a half. The fact that we're seeing that forward planning from the football club right through to even the players in the academy that are getting some professional contracts and some players that are getting loans out as well. I'm really excited to see that. But on this player specifically, he's a joy to watch. And I will say again, I haven't seen any of him this season, but last season I saw potentially every minute he played for Club Bruges, and he just really is a joy to watch. And in a team that has such great players, he still kind of stood out as a 17-year-old, as a player who just had a little something extra. And if we get to see that in a Spurs shirt, well, it's just a player that will get us in the edge of our seat and get us enjoying what we're seeing.
A few comments that's coming through, I have to ask you, Matt, is that fact that for many, obviously, ahead of this potential proposed move to Brentford, whether it happens or not, the feeling was that he's chosen Brentford over Spurs. So therefore, if the deal does fall through, do you have a potential issue of Spurs getting the player in when arguably we may not have been the player's first choice?
I get it. I understand why people might feel like that. For me, that would be more of an issue if it was someone that was going straight into the first team. You know, if you need to convince someone that we're the right club or convince them that they're in the right place, you don't want him playing 90 minutes a week. But I think for a player like Nusa, it's a sensible decision for him to prioritize the game time. And I kind of, it may sound a bit weird, but I suppose I trust him and his judgment and his team's judgment a little bit more, that if they do end up choosing Spurs as the next destination, there's a reason they'll have done that. I do feel as though maybe Postecoglou and the people that we have around now might not be as keen on the player, because you know how much he likes people to be fully invested in the project and to want this move. Remember what he said to James Maddison, whether you come or not, you're going to see different Spurs, that kind of mentality that we don't need you, but we want you kind of thing. But no, I wouldn't have... I wouldn't want us to pull out of the move or move away from it just because he wanted game time at Brentford.
Lo, I know there's only so much you can say at the moment, but what I wanted to ask you, if you don't mind me asking, is the fact that the player seems to have a really good team around him in relation to where they see his future planning go. Do you feel that's the case? I mean, again, it could be very easy to, you know, go with the biggest club that offers maybe the better contract, or again, you know, however you want to word that. But in Brentford, you could arguably say that that's a stepping stone where he would get more regular first team football than Spurs. So do you admire that about a player that, you know, if that move was to happen, it's a case that he may want the big moves in the future, but he just wants to have that, obviously, game time there to apply his trade in the league and to be ready for that next step up. And again, I have to stress the point, we're not sure what's happening with the guy at the moment, but what do you feel about the team around him now that are advising the player?
Well, I mean, I think that these things are, you know, when you're choosing a club to play for, it's not necessarily exact science. You can, as a player and a group of representatives around a player or a group of advisors, you know, you can be open to several scenarios at the same time. So it's, you know, it's not a question of always we want this and you have to offer us exactly this. You know, I'm talking about playing time, I'm talking about wages, all that kind of thing, right? So, you know, you can see why he would have chosen Brentford, because he's going to go there and he's going to play and he's going to be a star in their team. And, you know, and like you said, it would be potentially eventually a stepping stone onto, you know, bigger things. And he could be sold on to a bigger club, one of the top clubs in the Champions League at a later date. Now, you know, from Spurs' point of view, okay, Spurs is a slightly different ball game, really, if you're a player, because there's going to be a lot more competition for players. There's a lot more substantial competition for players. There's a lot more pressure, bigger club, bigger stadium, bigger fan base, bigger history, you know, and fighting for bigger things than Brentford, at least in the short term, because, you know, Spurs might find themselves in the Champions League next year. So, you know, those are the scenarios that you're going to be thinking about as a player. You know, do I fancy myself getting in that Tottenham team straight away? Do I feel like I need the time at another club to continue my development before I'm ready for that level? You know, you might think, actually, do you know what? I fancy competing against all those other players for a place in the first team. And I think the thing that you have to say about Ange Postecoglou and Tottenham is that, well, Ange will not be scared to play a player of any age if he's playing well, if he's the best player to be put in the team, right? If he's a star in training every week and he's going to make Tottenham a better team, then he's going to put him in there. So, you know, there is that side of it as well. You know, Chelsea, different ball game, I think, as well from the other two teams, because they've got so many players as it is. They've got a lot of players there already. You know, they've had complications in the last sort of 18 months about the amount of players that have been there and too many players competing for places and, you know, not sure who's going to be starting, who's going to be in the team and who's going to be sent out on loan. So I think, you know, from that point of view, Chelsea's a bit more difficult, right? The squad is bigger, it's more bloated, and you know, they've had there's been ramifications for that. So, you know, those are the kinds of things that are going to be going through a player's head when they're choosing. So you can, from his point of view and his agent's point of view, you can see the merits of signing for Brentford, and you can see the merits of signing for Tottenham, really, can't you? I mean, they both have their pluses and minuses. I'm
just intrigued to know, Lyall, had we not had a potential complication in the move, I was wondering, I was going to potentially ask you, if it was going to be a formality, this move, would it have been one that you would have felt maybe it's one that's got away from Spurs with regards to the player's potential? Or do you think it's far too early to say in the player's development to make such a case judge in relation to the fact if Spurs are missing out on the player, that would have been one that would have really gotten away?
Yeah, I mean, you can say too early to play. I mean, too early to say. I mean, you can say, okay, yeah, he's one that's got away because he's quite clearly a player that they've been interested in signing. But, you know, that's also not to say that there aren't other youngsters around that Tottenham are keen on either now or in the summer they feel they can bring in and improve the team. There are other players they can look at or have looked at, and I have been looking at. We've mentioned one or two of them in the past. Other wingers who are out there who are also exciting young talents. Jonathan Rowe at Norwich, to name one. We've talked about him. I don't think he's quite far along in his development as Nusa is, for example, and potentially the potential for Nusa could be better. But again, at this stage, it's kind of speculation and opinion, really, right? You said, you need the proof to really make a definitive call on that. And also, that's not to say that if he went to Brentford for a year or two, that Tottenham wouldn't then look to pay the money required to get him at that point anyway. So Spurs have done that in the past where they've been interested in players. I mean, James Maddison's a great example. That's a player that Spurs have tracked for years and years and years and years and had the opportunity to bring in. And they obviously thought at certain times that he just wasn't quite ready for that level. Now, we know the star that James Maddison is now, and you can make a sound argument to say that if James Maddison had come to Tottenham earlier, before he went to Leicester, for example, or when he was at Coventry before he went to Norwich, he might not have become the player he is now, because actually the trajectory to where he is now is what's made him the player where he is now. Do you see what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like the circumstances that players are coming into. He's coming into different circumstances now at Tottenham than he would have come into 3 years ago or 4 years ago or 5 years ago. You see what I mean? So
yeah. Well, look,
that
again,
makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, most certainly. Look, I think it'll be one we'll keep an eye on, because that is the nature of the window. And, that is living proof there of a move there that shows you anything can happen. It's not done till it's done. Of course, if it's Jason McGovern, they've got to be holding up the shirt. So we shall see. Look, there's a few days to go. We'll keep our eyes peeled. And of course, if there's any further updates on Nusa and his next
I think I should also say as well, sorry to interrupt you, but I think I should also say as well that I think, given the potential of the player as well, whichever club he ends up signing for, I don't think it's necessarily it rubs off negatively on any of the other clubs that don't get him. I mean, it's just the nature of football. It's the nature of the transfer window. And he's a top player with a top talent. So, that's... it'll be interesting to see where he ends up and how his development goes, wherever that is.
Yeah, I mean, look, one thing I would say, Lyall, is the fact you mentioned it there briefly. I mean, Spurs have invested some period of time into him. So on that basis alone, again, with that investment of time, it's clearly a player they've obviously liked and wanted to sign. So obviously on that basis alone, you would have hoped Spurs would have got the deal done. But like we've said, I mean, I think on the base of Sunday morning when that news came in about Brentford, I think there was a fairly common sense understanding that logical player would like to play football. It would make sense to want to go and play where the football is, not necessarily where the bigger club is or where he's going to get a bigger wage, right?
Well, exactly. And I think it's important to say that Tottenham's squad now is in a good place. They're not in a... The good thing for Tottenham and for Tottenham fans that they can feel very, very good about and confident about at the moment is that the squad's in a good place. They're not at the end of the window scrambling around to fix a problem or, with an injury crisis and having to plug with a player that they don't necessarily want long term, forced into doing something that's not part of their long-term plan. The squad is exactly where they want it. Now for them, it's about, can we get, top youngsters with top potential ahead of competition now while we've got the chance as a bonus, if anything else. I think that's how they would look at it. Because as I said, the squad's in a good place, and most of their work, the next step of improving the squad will be done in the summer anyway, as it is for any team.
Amen. Look, again, any further updates during this next hour or so, we will most certainly come back over to Lyall, who you'll see frantically panicking with there's another update. Or can I just say, this man was cool as a cucumber off air before this was all happening. Bearing in mind, I've got to be honest, it's been one of those days where obviously now, as we all know, a window in general where it hasn't been the most busiest, and then suddenly 5-10 minutes before we air, we get that, which is again the nature of the window. So let me hand over to Matt.
My job to keep cool though, my friend.
Absolutely, and he does it very, very
well.
While
emotions are running high in the transfer window, someone's got to stay calm. Yeah,
absolutely, mate. You do it well, Matt. Let's hand over to you, mate, and let's discuss really what has been a fairly quiet window before we do get into obviously the names and where we are with regards to how we're going to finish this window. Over to you, mate.
Yeah, Lyall, we spoke with your colleague Michael Bridge about this last night, about how quiet the window's been, and time is starting to run out for these Premier League clubs who might want to upgrade their squad in the January window. It slams shut. That's a phrase we have to go with, isn't it? 11 p.m. on Thursday, the 1st of February. From a journalistic perspective and kind of knowing what's going on behind the scenes, how different has this market been to what you've become used to with the lack of business from Premier League clubs?
Yeah, different, very different. I mean, to sum it up I was talking to a top agent today who said to me, well, after I've done probably my next bit of business, that's it. I'm finished and I'm going to go on holiday before the end of the window's even finished. So, it's not often that's the case. The January transfer window is always quieter. We've said this, we've had this conversation, haven't we? It's always been quieter than the summer one, always more difficult to do good business in the summer one, but there's always been a lot more going on than this one. And this one has been particularly challenging for the clubs, challenging for us, obviously. It's important for us at Sky to be accurate and to be right about things, rather than being quick and first and engaging in too much gossip and speculation, that kind of thing. And when you're in a situation where really, most of what's being talked about between the clubs and between agents and sporting directors and players and that kind of thing, when most of it is speculative, which is, we want to do this, we'd like to do that, but this has to happen for that to happen, and we're waiting for this to move, then it all is quite speculative rather than concrete. So it's been particularly challenging for our reporters and myself and the guys on the news desk to really sort of not only keep track of all the what ifs, but also report them to the audience, in a way that's still authoritative and concrete and something that you can trust. I think we've done a good job of it. I hope we have anyway, and I hope people think so. But I think the main thing to say about this transfer window is that the PSR rules, the profit and sustainability rules, and the charges that have been given to Nottingham Forest and Everton have spooked the clubs about what they can spend and how much they can spend. And I think that they are, those who are sailing close to the wind, shall we say, with regards to their budgets, have been very, very fearful and cautious about even going over by £1 or £2, to put it mildly, that it's just not worth the risk in their view to go over and potentially suffer, things like points deductions, which, the independent commission have shown already that they're not afraid to dish a points deduction out if you come a cropper with the rules. So that's the situation that we're in. That's really what slowed the market down. And then you've got the other market forces really that have been playing a factor for quite a long time that are tying into that. So you've got not a great deal of money in Europe and at the European clubs, mainly because, and it seems like a long time ago now, but it still is the case that the COVID pandemic hit the European clubs harder than it hit the clubs in the Premier League. It hit their countries harder and it hit their football harder, and it set them back financially by quite a distance, by quite a number of years. And they're still playing catch up. They're still trying to bring their budgets back to some kind of a resemblance of the place of where they were in 2019 before they left. And so other than the very big clubs, your Bayerns, your PSGs, your Real Madrids, there isn't a great deal of money for these teams to spend. So, when you're a Premier League club and you've got players that you're willing to sell and you need to sell them to bring those players in, you're looking to Europe to come with offers for those players, and those offers have just not been coming in abundance. They've not been coming at anywhere near the level that they required to be able to re-spend. There's so many different examples that I can give. I mean, you can give examples from Chelsea, like Armando Broja, who, they've wanted 50 million for, even 40 million, between 40 and 50 million for. The clubs just aren't there willing to pay that, even though you could say Broja is a top striker or could become a top striker. They're just not willing to pay that amount of money because they don't have it, right? That's one example. There's many, many that I can give. There's also the Saudi Arabia factor as well. Obviously, they were the saviour in the summer. There was obviously the first real Saudi Arabian window of we're going to come and we're going to try and buy top players and bring them in. And I think that there was a hope that those clubs would come again this time, and they haven't. Now, what the reasons are for that is still a little bit unclear. I think there's also a little bit of a uncertainty among some of the players after they've seen the first wave of players go there. I think among other players, they're a little bit uncertain about whether Saudi Arabia is the place for me in my career now, and also whether going there halfway through a season is the right thing to do. And I think so. Those are just sort of two factors that have been affecting the window. And then you've got players who simply don't want to go anywhere, right? Who are still under contract. I think of Anthony Martial as a great example at Manchester United. Manchester United would have listened to offers for Anthony Martial, but he doesn't want to go anywhere. He's only got 6 months left on his contract. And you have to say, from his point of view, why should he? If he doesn't want to leave Manchester United now, why should he if he's still under contract? So those are all the different factors that are playing a part in the stagnant sort of challenging and frustrating window, and everybody's been waiting really for that first domino to fall, really, that would trigger the rest, and it just hasn't come for whatever reason. There are still things that can happen between now and then. We know that Newcastle still want to sign a midfield player. They're open to letting Miguel Almiron leave. There's still a chance he could go to Saudi Arabia, to Al Shabab, but the Saudi Arabian window is tomorrow, so they've got times against them in that respect as well. So if he goes and they can bring a midfielder in, depending on where that midfielder comes from, that might trigger that club to do something. So there might be a little bit of a snowball effect in the last few days of the window. But as for any sensational, dramatic, we didn't see that coming transfers between now and the end of the window. Let's see. I'll be surprised if we get that one that really comes out of left field. Let's hope we do. And obviously, you can watch it all on Sky Sports News on transfer deadline day to see if that happens.
Lyall, just out of interest, am I right in saying, because again, look, you are the expert here, and I know you've had to become an expert with the PSR, given the fact that's overtaken pretty much your life probably in the last few months. Is there a reset taking place? I believe, tell me if I'm wrong, I believe that the way the calculations work in regards to the summer, this is obviously the last opportunity for the budgets to essentially then have them reset for the summer, in which clubs can then once again go again. And that's why, am I right in saying you are seeing that inflation over homegrown players to have the opportunity to sell? Yes,
well, the financial year for a football club is July the 1st to June the 30th, right? That's why you see all contracts run from July the 1st to June the 30th, regardless of when you sign a player. If you sign a player in January, you're signing him on a 4.5-year deal or a 3.5-year deal, right? Which takes you through to the summer. So yeah, that's when the books are reset, you could say. Yes. So that's why you'll see at the moment a few clubs have been trying to do loan deals with obligations, because they can't pay the money now for the permanent deal. So they'll do a loan now for the sort of remainder of this year's budget that they've got, and then defer the payment for the summer. For example, that's what Atletico Madrid were proposing when they wanted to sign Matt O'Reilly from Celtic. It was a loan now, and then it's basically just a way of deferring the permanent payment or the start of the permanent payments until the summer. It's like signing a player in the summer now. So a lot of clubs have been looking to do that, really, to sort of use a bit of next season's budget or get the summer deal started and use the remainder money that they've got to bring players in now on loan. But we actually haven't even seen that many of those actually go through at this stage.
Yeah.
So yes, you are right. And with regards to the PSR rules in general, it'll be interesting to see what happens with those rules, because I think it's quite clear that they've caused a lot of frustration among the clubs. And these are the club's rules in the first place. The Premier League clubs came up with these together and all signed off on them. So whether they look to revisit those and do something on them in the future, let's see. I mean, I'd be surprised if they didn't at least discuss it because of the frustrations that they felt this time. And maybe if next January is similar and clubs are really feel hamstrung with what they want to do, then maybe they will. Maybe they'll talk about reviewing the rules.
It has been, again, one of those months where it feels like it hasn't really got going, apart from, I've got to say, tonight, which is a really weird thing to say, because I am very conscious that, obviously, whilst we're live, there's lots of multiple reports coming through, and obviously Lyall is with us here, so it may be difficult for Lyall to instantly check what is going on, and it's the second. I appreciate we are getting multiple reports now coming through that Nusa has failed a medical with Brentford. That's the latest that we're hearing. Obviously, of course, if Lyall can bring us anything more on that, he most certainly will do in the next hour and a bit. Obviously, conscious that he is obviously with us here. So he isn't obviously in the medical facility to be able to bring us any news on that medical. But I'm sure if Lyall gets anything more, he'll look at his phone. He'll most certainly let us know. But yeah, I mean, look, I think the interesting impact of it is coming over to you, Lyall. That's, again, Spurs have been more active this month than pretty much every other team in the Premier League. I'm led to believe, I think Spurs are the only Premier League club that have signed 2 players that go straight into their senior squad. Obviously, in the case of Timo Werner, who comes on a loan deal from RB Leipzig, Spurs have an option, of course, to make that permanent. and of course the signing of Radu Dragusin from Genoa, which only happened 2 days later after that. And I think many people were suggesting this, that had these two players come at the end of the month, which Spurs seem to do, I think everyone would be absolutely buzzing. But I think because Spurs did the 2 deals at the start of the month, I'm not saying everyone's unhappy, but I think maybe some were thinking, oh, is there one more to come? Or are we having a sensational month here? Or Spurs going to be storming the market? I mean, how would you rate, Lyall, for you, the term caliber of those players Spurs are signing, in your opinion?
Well, I think the caliber is very good. I mean, Timo Werner is a top player. He's among the top players around. You know, he's one of the top players in Germany. He was playing at a big club at Germany in RB Leipzig. He's played a lot in the Champions League. He's got a lot of experience now, even for his relatively young age. So, you know, I think he's quite a shrewd signing. You know, we talked about it, didn't we, last time? A little bit how that really kind of fits the profile that they're looking for, especially while Son is away, to you know, be with them for the rest of the season, and see what he can do back in the Premier League. So I think that's a good bit of business, clever little bit of business, you know. And then Dragusin as well was that much needed extra centre half that they, you know, they wanted to do in the summer. Obviously, they wanted to do another centre half in the summer, didn't they? And they really needed them another player, given that they've had to play, you know, 2 fullbacks in the centre half position this season at times. So, you know, as I think we talked about it in length, Spurs are in a good place in terms of transfers. There's a lot of alignment with staff at the club and Ange's representatives and you know, and the chairman and the board with, you know, what they want to do and what the strategy is, and that's really what you've seen executed, I think, in the business that Spurs have done so far. Is that coming to fruition? Is that alignment, everybody agreement on the strategy, who to go for, who's doing what, what's everybody's role, and how those players come in. And you need that. You need that in modern football to be able to be formidable in the transfer market. Because if you don't have that alignment, you know, any kind of stalling or any kind of indecision or any kind of disagreement over, you know, which player you should go for or how much you should be willing to spend on them, that's when other clubs come in and pinch those players. So I think you know, that puts Spurs in a good position, and that's one of the reasons why we've seen them do the business that they've done so far. But also going back to the financial stuff that we talked about, I mean, dare I say that Daniel Levy's shrewd financial management of Tottenham over the years has actually put them in a position of strength when other clubs have not been in such a position of strength, right? They're not in that situation of being so hamstrung financially to not be able to do something, and perhaps not taking a risk or let's say, bringing in a player that they were less sure about in the summer has actually worked in their favour, because they've actually been able to spend more time on it between the summer and January and going for the right player. Now, obviously, it still remains to be seen whether Dragusin will be the right player, but at least we think he will be. Got lots of talent, lots of potential. But we need to see him play first.
On top of those 2 incomings, Lyall, there's been departures galore at Tottenham this January. Hugo Lloris, Eric Dyer and Ivan Perisic have all left the club. The latter 2 on loan to Bayern Munich and Hajduk Split until their contracts end in the summer. Sergio Reguilon, Jed Spence and Japhet Tanganga were all recalled from their loan deals to be sent out to new clubs. Alfie Devine as well, now plying his trade with Plymouth in the Championship. Ashley Phillips, Matthew Craig and Josh Keeley also got loan moves, adding to those already out in Tongi and Domblay, Joe Rodon and Troy Parrott. Something that I think Spurs and Paratici in particular have been criticised with in the past, not really been able to get players off the books. Tottenham have wasted no time in moving on those players that Ange doesn't see as a viable option in his squad at the moment, with strategic and well thought out loans, it has to be said, for some of those younger players. How impressed should we be, and how impressed are you by the way Tottenham have managed to move on so many players this month?
Yeah, I mean, well, not too impressed. I mean, most of those are loan deals, so you know, they're loan deals for youngsters that need to go out and play. So I mean, I think that from Tottenham's point of view, the most pleasing outgoings is probably finally finding homes for Eric Dyer and Hugo Lloris, who were, you know, supposed to leave in the summer and didn't, and were still around. So, you know, that's probably the most pleasing thing for them, really, to, you know, move on fully from the previous regimes at Spurs and the previous squads at Spurs, and you know, really crack on with that reset and the refreshment of the Tottenham project and the squad and the culture. So that's probably the most pleasing thing. It's certainly, you have to say, impressive to get Eric Dyer to Bayern Munich. I don't think a lot of players would have seen him going. Sorry, a lot of people would have seen him going there at this stage in his career. But that's good for him, and obviously suited all parties. And Hugo Lloris got the nice send off that he deserved. So yeah, I mean, listen, good for Spurs to lighten the squad a little bit, lighten the load, and move players out. I mean, there are some players who are still out there on loan who there are big question marks over the futures of and what happens to them. People like Jed Spence, and in particular, I can think of who really needs to kind of resurrect his potential and his the form he was showing at Middlesbrough. Really, if they're to get a good offer for him on a permanent basis, because I don't see him having a future at Spurs. I don't think now at this point.
Looking ahead to what we might see in the last couple of days of the window, and it's felt really since we got that Dragosin deal over the line that the two possibilities for Tottenham could be A, looking for a new midfielder if we were to move someone on, and B, bringing in a young player in a similar deal to Destiny Udogie or Pat Matter-Sarrett. Again, unclear what's happening with Antonio Nusa, but is that still the case as we move into these final 3 days, that if Spurs are to do something, it will be one of those two options?
Well, youngsters is definitely what they're looking for. Yeah, at this stage, I think I think if whatever happens with Nusa now, aside from that, there might be one other one, another a young one, probably an academy player that they would look to bring in. But apart from that, if the Nusa deal doesn't happen, then I would be very surprised if Spurs did anything. I think the thing about Gallagher, for example, is that Chelsea want a huge amount of money for him. I mean, we've said 40 million. I think it's even more than that. People have been saying to me, is it 50? Is it 60? It might even be more than that. From conversations I've had over the last sort of 24 hours, that now they really are pricing him out or trying to price him out of leaving at the moment. So I'll be really surprised to see Gallagher leave at this point, given the amount of money that Chelsea want for him. But Chelsea really want to sign a striker, and they do need to sell someone to be able to do that. So they've been trying to get buyers for Breuer and for Treloba, the centre half, and they haven't been able to do that at the moment. So, we've been keeping it in the back of our minds that Gallagher is the sort of that third player on that list, and the one that we know does have interest. And there might be a door open there to get Gallagher this month, but I just can't see Tottenham, paying that amount of money for him this month, especially given also his contract situation. He's got 18 months left. They get to the summer and he's got a year left. And if he still hasn't signed for Chelsea by the summer, then a year left on his contract, and he's not going to be a 60, 70, 80 or whatever £1 million player. He's going to be a lot less than that with a year left, isn't he? So it's probably more viable deal in the summer, given that if he doesn't sign a new deal there.
Just on the PSR point that we discussed, Lyall, what if an impact that does it have on Chelsea if they don't move on Breuer or Gallagher this month? How tricky does that make their summer in terms, not that I really care about Chelsea in terms of the window and what they do, but I'm just intrigued to know if they're in a situation where, we sit here saying Spurs can maybe not afford Gallagher, but how much pressure does that put on Chelsea by not allowing Gallagher or Breuer to leave this month when it comes to their next window? I'm just wondering, these next few days, do they get really touchy feet and they have to move them on?
Yeah, perhaps it puts a little bit more pressure on Chelsea in the summer, just because, there is a financial reset at that point. So, they're not as in a sort of stringent place of needing, to bring money in to buy. They'll be able to have a little bit more leeway at the start of another year's budget. But it's the contract situation really that is the pivotal thing, I think, for Gallagher in particular. That if he gets to the summer and he only has a year left, that's really when it's hard for any club to justify a very, very big fee for a player who's only got a year left, unless you're talking about somebody like Harry Kane, for example.
And just one final on Gallagher, because I think I've asked this before, but the fact of the matter is, Lyall, this guy that we've spoken about it with you this January in the summer, I mean, I have to keep reiterating this because I think I'm not suggesting many people don't get this, but I mean, the reality is that surely Spurs would not be showing an interest in Gallagher or courting Gallagher if there can't be some interest there from the players' side. I mean, I'm not going crazy by saying that, right? There must be some interest from Gallagher's side, or is that the way of an agent driving up, maybe trying to get a new contract at a very, very good rate?
No, I don't think it's that. No, I don't think so. I mean, I think Gallagher's in a situation in his career now really where, he needs to be at somewhere for a sizable time, a good amount of time, playing every week. I mean, he's shown at Chelsea, he's probably been arguably the best player at Chelsea this season, certainly the most consistent player this season, I think. He's in a given the situation at Chelsea and how complicated it's been and how many players he's been up against there and the amount of money they spend on other midfield players, the fact that Gallagher's emerged as, them arguably their best and most consistent player, especially in midfield, I think it says a lot about the player really and what he needs to be doing at this point in his career, which is playing every week at a high level. And if he's not going to be able to do that at Chelsea, if for whatever reason he doesn't sign a new contract there and he's not the future at Chelsea, then you look around the Premier League, the other top clubs, where he could play. I mean, he could probably play arguably any of them, but I think Spurs would make sense for a number of different reasons, given the way that they play and the way that he plays, and the fact that they are looking for another midfielder to kind of complete the set, really, to complete the midfield picture that they've got in mind. And Gallagher really does fit that profile.
Interesting, Matt. I'm going to hand over to you because I'm conscious that there's been a few players that you've mentioned as well this month, with relation to the fact that these might be potential summer targets in and around the Championship. And I must just add again, guys, just so many don't think we're skipping over it, we have seen links today to Jacob Ramsey, some tentative ones. So, I mean, again, Lyall won't comment on that if he feels it's obviously a purpose to comment on that. So, Matt, I'll hand over to you just to discuss some of those players Spurs have been linked with that are potential, raw young talent that could interest Spurs maybe in the summer, Matty.
Yeah, there's one of those, Lyall, that you've already mentioned, Jonathan Rowe of Norwich, a very, very exciting young player. Middlesbrough's Hayden Hackney as well, one that's kind of been mentioned in and around Tottenham, and Adam Morton for Blackburn, who's also attracting attention from Crystal Palace. Would you say any of these will or could be summer targets for Tottenham?
Yeah, potentially. If Rowe doesn't go now, there's plenty of clubs who are interested in Jonathan Rowe at this point. I don't think it's completely off the table that he might leave and go somewhere before the end of this week. Hayden Hackney, Tottenham do like him as well, for sure. But I don't think they're going to be looking to sign him now. I think it's probably better to leave him where he is as well, at Borough and playing every week at this point, given, the step that he's at in his career at the moment. I've not heard anything about Spurs and Wharton. Adam Wharton is another talented player in the Championship with good potential. But like you said, Crystal Palace have been bidding for him and they're still in talks and hoping to get a deal done for him this week. So, I think it's more likely that he'll end up there than anywhere else, I think, at this point.
Is there anything on Samuel Illing Jr. from Juventus? Again, a name that just hasn't really gone away this window.
Yeah, I mean, again, he's another youngster that Spurs have looked at. At Juventus, I think, again, he's another one who needs to play regularly now at this point in his career. But Spurs have got, other targets like Nusa, for example, who've been a far more priority, I think, to them than Samuel Illing Jr. This month. So, again, I don't think we're going to see him at Tottenham at any point soon.
Can I just say the reason why I'm laughing? I'm really thinking, why am I laughing? I've got someone Ricky on the booze again. Really, I should have been on the booze for this month, for this transfer window. It's Lee Smith saying, sorry, Lee, I've got no more bloody Championship players. God, how ambitious are we? Some of the best players Spurs have signed have come from some of the Championships, League One. Dele Alli, I mean, look, we know Dele, bless him, it's obviously where his career is now, obviously not what he wants to be, and we wish Dele all the best in coming back. But Dele Alli, when he first came onto the scene at Spurs, was arguably an incredible talent that was highly prominent in featuring for Spurs in the Champions League. So, I mean, just a reminder that, look, whilst we'd all love to see Spurs go out there and sign 80, 90 million pound players, there are uncovered hidden gems in the Championship that I know, Lyall, personally, again, it's a market you've scattered very, very hard because you can find some real top talent there, right? It worth me saying.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm only going to defend the Championship because I think actually if you look across the leagues in Europe, the Championship only gets a bad rep because it's the second tier to the Premier League. I think if you actually compared the level of the Championship to other clubs around Europe, it would come up above quite a lot of them. I mean, there's an argument that it's the sixth best league in Europe. You could watch games in the Championship and then be far more enjoyable and be played at a much higher level than most of the games in France or a lot of the games in France. So especially also if you're looking to bring players in who are used to playing English football, because the tempo and the style of play is a lot more similar to the Premier League in the Championship than say it is in Serie A. There's or the Eredivisie or something like this. It's just less glamorous, isn't it, to sign a player from Coventry City or Norwich than it is to sign a player from, I don't know, name who you want, Valencia or Genoa. It sort of lacks that exotic sort of sense of the unknown, doesn't it? It's like, oh, we know the Championship, and the Championship's like this, but it's not really like that. It's actually a really high level, a really good league, and there's lots of talented youngsters coming through the Championship. And actually, I think that it's taken the Premier League longer than it should have to actually take notice of that.
Sam Allardyce always said it great. If that his name was Sam Allardyce, he would have most certainly got some roles. Certainly some roles overseas. Not that I'm.
If his name was Allardyce, he would have been managing Real Madrid.
Again, I have to put some context here. I'm more happy with Big Ange. I don't want to go to Big Sam. I'm more than happy, of course, with Big Ange. I don't want to go to Big Sam just yet. What I do want to ask you about, Lyall, if I can, is Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, or just to get your, I'm sure you'll back this up. Obviously, Sky in Germany, they reported earlier today that after new talks in the morning, Pierre-Emile Højbjerg has decided to stay at Spurs. This January, he rejected all the offers. His lawyer, Lars Haugreen, said, despite rumours and noise, the player always kept focus on helping the team, coaches, and Tottenham. The player never asked to leave. Now he's very ambitious for Tottenham and Denmark, continuing to improve himself like he did all his career. He's a strong character, and his only focus is Tottenham to finish the season well and to help as much as possible. Pierre always likes challenges. So I'm intrigued to get your thoughts on that, Lyall, and just really from you to know, was there ever really any feasible move for Pierre this month really on the table?
Potentially there was. I mean, I think that from his point of view, it's been a case of seeing what interest would come his way and come Tottenham's way, the level of the club, and what kind of messages, were coming from those clubs about, whether they were going to try and sign him now or try and sign him in the summer. I think Pierre-Emile Højbjerg wants to be playing at a top club in the Champions League. I think he would insist that he should be playing at that level, and I think he's got a good argument. I mean, he perhaps doesn't fit perfectly with what Ange is trying to do with the team long term. From a I know not a tactical is probably not unfair, but maybe from a technical point of view, long term. But obviously, he's been important at certain times for Spurs this season, and he's been needed in the last two games. So I think you have to look at the whole situation around him and the conditions to arrive at where we are now and why the lawyer has come out and said what he said. Point number one: there aren't the clubs there for him this month that he would like to go to. I mean, Lyon was the last one that we reported on who had an interest in him, but he wasn't interested in going there. So that gives you an idea.
Okay.
Second point, I think that Tottenham would want to recoup most, if not all the money that they spent on him, if not more, to sell him this month as well. And so there hasn't been clubs who've been willing to pay that. And also, I think that Spurs have needed him and have wanted to keep him, really. I know that they've been assessing their options really sort of week to week, with obviously players being off at AFCON and Asia Cup, really to see who would be coming back. And there's been players injured as well. Obviously, Lo Celso's been out. James Maddison's been out. So, they wanted to see really by this stage, last few days of the window, what does the squad look like? Who's come back? I think if we're in a situation where Bissouma and Sarr had come back, it might be a little bit different. But then again, maybe not, because, like I said, the real clubs that Pierre would like to play for have not been there for him this month, and nobody's come in and slapped an offer on the table that's been acceptable. So it was only really not surprising to see that the lawyer came out and said that he's going to be staying at this point, and sort of putting to bed any speculation that might come his way this week, especially since he's probably going to be playing against Brentford this week. So.
I mean, in a way, I think that's not again for those that avidly love their transfers, which obviously me and Matt do. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Like you say, there you get a bit of clarification before the Brentford game going into it that he's fully committed. And I think again, look, bar in the last 10, 15 minutes, Matt, that we actually discussed on Friday, I don't think you can have too many arguments over Højbjerg's performance against Man City. Just again, as we put it down to, bit of fatigue towards the end, a couple of mistakes there. But as we've always said, Matt, can't ever really question the guy's attitude, his professionalism. Look, you can question the fact that he's not good enough for the system. That's not his fault. But again, I think as Lyall says there, if the right club just isn't offering the right money, then it just doesn't feel right this winter to move him on. And given the fact, as we've seen with Spurs, that this season, the amount of injuries we've had in midfield, the one key consistent thing about Højbjerg, Matt, he's always been fit, hasn't he? I mean, that's the key thing, Matt, here.
100%. If every player that was looking for a move out of the club or that was potentially going to be leaving, if every single one of them applied themselves in the way that Højbjerg did and just approached every game the way Højbjerg did, our problems will be halved. And for me, it's as simple as that, because he's a player who hasn't been here long in the grand scheme of things, but it just feels like he's been that one constant throughout this tumultuous 3-4 years that we've had. He's always shown up in midfield. He's had some very bad games, he's had some very bad spells, but I think that in a big moment that he's someone you can rely on, and he showed that in that game against City. He showed it in the game against Manchester United, and the fans haven't always been exactly kind to him, but he's never let that get in his way. He's never let that impact the effort that he puts in for this football club, and you can see that passion that he has. And look, I think passion isn't a defining factor in what makes a fantastic player. I don't think that's the only thing that we should be looking for, but there's been times in his Spurs career where I would have forgiven him for maybe losing that passion and maybe losing that drive to play for this football club, but it's never wavered. And I think we do have to appreciate that, given what we've seen around him in the last 2-3 years as well.
I agree. And also, I think I may have mentioned it last time a little bit, that I think he's suffered a little bit with a change in the wind recruitment wise. It's the fashionable, trendy thing to do for clubs to be trying to buy younger players with potential, and that's where the money's being spent, right? And that didn't used to be the case. I mean, 10 years ago, your top clubs, your Chelsea's, Man United's, Liverpool's, Arsenal's, they were all signing players in their prime, 26, 27, 28, 29 years old, looking to get players at the real height of their careers with experience, but not too old that you're not going to get 5 years out of them at least. And you have to say that Pierre is kind of at that position in his career now, really, where he's not a youngster anymore. He's got a lot of Premier League experience under his belt. He's got Champions League experience under his belt. He might not fit what Tottenham are trying to do technically long term, but there are plenty of other clubs you think that he would go in there and be first choice, or be, especially in that defensive midfield sort of single pivot role, because that is really what his speciality is. And I think he is an Antonio Conte player, isn't he? He is a Jose Mourinho player.
Awesome.
That's what he is.
Awesome.
Is he not? He's not, but he's not necessarily not really long term. Probably an Ange Postecoglou player, and that's just the nature of football. Yeah.
Do you think, Lyall, summer wise, and I'll let Matt also come in here? Do you think he'll get himself a really good move potentially in the summer, as in more options on the table?
Yeah, I hope he does, and potentially. I mean, Juventus have an interest in him long term, and that's the kind of the club we're talking about. But just haven't come for him this window.
Okay, Matt, you want to come back in there?
Yeah, I think he'll get a move. Atletico Madrid, I think, are one that's been mentioned as well. And I think he's someone that would fit into a Diego Simeone system as well. But I think Tottenham players do, or Tottenham fans at times do, need to differentiate between a player who's not good and a player who doesn't fit. And for me, Pierre-Emile Højbjerg is just a player who at the moment doesn't fit, and it's nobody's fault. There's no one to blame for that. It's just the way that it is, and unfortunately, his career at Spurs will be a victim of that.
Absolutely. I'm going to be really unprofessional now and say, Matt, I would like people to have a laugh here about our running orders. Matt, I've actually run out of ink on our running order, so I don't know if it was you or me next.
I'm in next.
Just to give you an insight of what Last is really like behind the scenes here. I mean, we've run out of ink on the paperwork as to what's going on. Not an indication of what me and Matt do behind the scenes for these shows. So Matt, I'll hand over to you.
Hey, Ricky, let's not lie. You're the one doing all the work behind the scenes. I show up at 8:25 and just ask some questions.
I will say, Matt, before I made that point, this podcast was award winning before I made that point. After I don't know after the back of that.
Got the panel at the Football Content Awards are watching this, just regretting everything.
Yeah, there's not going to be any awards for this particular episode.
Downgraded. Downgraded. Go on, Matty.
But look, while we're talking about a lack of clarity everywhere, I think that's a good time to look at the future of Bryan Gil, because he's one player that we could still see a little bit of movement on towards the end of this window. There's been a few teams that have been mentioned. Brighton won in the last couple of days with Gil. Look, he's dropped down the pecking order behind Timo Werner. We've seen he's behind Alejo Valise, and if we're to believe that Scarlett is ahead of Valise, that's just another player who's ahead of Bryan Gil as he tries to get some game time. even though he has played 10 times this season, a few sub appearances, a few big starts at the Etihad especially, it does look like he's not going to get the minutes in the second half of the season. Like, what do you think the future holds for Bryan Gil between now and the deadline?
Between now and the deadline, I would think it's more likely he stays at this point because, I'm not hearing that he's pushing for a move to a loan anywhere. I think that Brighton interest, I understand that there's not a lot of interest from Brighton. I think that was some naughty, cheeky business being done somewhere. Somebody playing, silly buggers there at some point, I think is what I was told. So that's one reason why we haven't been reporting any interest from Brighton, because we just don't think that interest is there. And he's not in a rush to leave. He likes things. I think we talked about this last time. I think he likes Ange. He likes training under Ange. He likes playing for Ange. And he's been sort of used quite a lot off the bench, actually, I think. Not for many minutes, but he has been coming on. So I think he probably fancies his chances at hopefully getting a little bit more game time between now and the end of the year. Now, that's the short term. I think the long-term interest, I would say, is probably more likely to be elsewhere. But because, whether the Premier League is right for him or not, I think that's still undecided. I think that jury's out on that, whether he is, just the right, model of player, really. I think probably other leagues maybe suit him better. And if he's going to go on and become, realize his potential, I would say that it's probably better for him to do that in another country.
Can I ask you, Lyall, before I'll let Matt ask you about Sessegnon, I just want to ask you on Hill, do you put that one down, Matt, or Lyall, should I say, as a bit of a failure now, as a move? I mean, the fact that he came in with such a potential high, I wouldn't say high ceiling, but, a real high potential of what a player he could be. And I think at the time, Paratici, it was being hired as this amazing deal. I mean, obviously, you remember Eric Lamela was part of that deal. And I think many thought, God, we got a really good move here, letting Lamela go. But when you argue the fact Lamela was probably, now, I know many thought Lamela was quite injury prone, but you would have maybe got more games out of Lamela than what we've got out of Hill, right? I mean, how do you reflect on this move now, a few years on, Lyall? Because you was obviously on the show at the time, I think. Someone's coming through.
It's been an odd one, hasn't it? Because he just hasn't seemed to fit under a number of managers. He's had some decent performances, shown some glimpses here and there. Not really sure on what his best position is, left or right, or is he actually number 10? I mean, I was talking to a Premier League manager, a few weeks ago, who said that he thought maybe he's actually that Hill's long-term position might more be as a number 10, so playing in the hole. So again, it depends, I think, on what sort of system you play and where he could be effective or not. But yeah, I think the physicality of the Premier League is obviously taken a lot of time to get to grips with. And, the Premier League is ruthless like that, isn't it? If you don't come in and get to grips with things physically quite quickly, then you can just get drowned out, really. And, I think that it's been hard for him to keep his head above water at times. This season, I think he's shown a little bit, some glimpses, but it's that last little bit to his game that's missing, isn't it? It's getting the ball and providing a great assist or sticking the ball in the net, which is what you need from your wide players and your forwards and your attacking players. You need to really see some. I'm trying to avoid terrible cliches. You need to see some real, a dividend really being paid off at the end of the good stuff that they do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with Hill, I mean, Matt, we've had endless discussions on this guy. Again, I mean, you look at it now and just think the guy, and I don't want to sound stereotypical by saying this, but I think you look at his physicality or lack of that. I mean, I think he's made, for La Liga and obviously Serie A, where I think he'd be a tremendous player there. I think he's got all the ability in the world. I just think the Premier League, such a physical league that you really have to be 100% on peak with that. Do you think, again, Matt, you look at this now, it's been a bit of a wasted opportunity by bringing him in, but do you think the time now is really right to move this guy if we can?
Yeah, look, I think you have to look at the contract situation and realize that the closer it gets to the end of that contract, if we are going to look for a permanent sale, the longer that goes, the less money we're going to get. And like you said, it was a very big deal and it did happen. I think it is worth mentioning though that I don't think we've helped him enough with the loan moves that we've given him, because we sent him back to Valencia and we sent him back to Sevilla, and the bits that are missing in his game, he's not going to get that over there. Like I think a championship move would be brilliant for him, or even to a lower level Premier League team, just actually been able to get out in the football pitch consistently and actually deal with the English game and see what it's like. But I think if you have to look at this from an unbiased view and look, he's a player I think there is a lot of talent in there. But ultimately, for me, he's the same player he was when we signed him 2.5 years ago. I don't think there's anything you can look at there and say, well, he's improved this or he's improved that. And again, look, he's not having much game time, and I don't think we've helped him enough. But it's just another Jack Clarke situation for me. I think he's a very, very good player with a lot of talent, but I personally just don't see that talent coming to fruition at Tottenham, unfortunately. Which, look, it's going to be a blow, and it's going to be difficult to see him succeed elsewhere. Thinking that could have been at Spurs, but I do unfortunately think that boat has sailed.
I don't really want to disrespect to Bryan Gil, but I'd say Jack Clarke's future looks really promising. I think, that one there, Lyall, that's a guy that could be back in the league, right, Lyall? I mean, he's been really, really good since he's left Tottenham. It seems, again, one that maybe you'd argue got away again, that you was here. I mean, when you look at Lyall, I hate to bring this up, but that 2019 window, Spurs, we have the unfortunate thing of, I know, Lyall, you don't see him on here anymore. Jason, bless him. Jason will remind me of every window. There's a 2019 window. Ndombele, Lo Celso, Ryan, Sessegnon, Jack Clarke. This was the window, if everyone wants to remember, after Spurs got to the Champions League final, and that was going to be the window Spurs were going to build on under Pochettino. When you look back now at that, Lyall, I mean, look, we've come along a far way in terms of the recruitment since then, but I think we've discussed this before, Lyall. That window was severely damaging. No one could have known what those players were or weren't going to do, but again, you just get windows like that, Lyall, you just think, God, it was just a window where it all just went wrong in terms of players coming in, just didn't adjust and hit the ground running. And Ndombele's still here. You'd imagine now his career's pretty much been and gone at Spurs. I mean, looking back now, that window, Lyall, how do you reflect on it? It's a number of years ago, and you covered it on here, which feels like a long time ago now. 5 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to generalize about the whole window, but you want to sort of talk about the players individually. Well, they were all brought in to play for Mauricio Pochettino, and he was gone inside 2 months. So there's that.
Yeah.
They're coming in to play a certain way or a certain style, and under a certain manager, and that's a huge part of why players sign is the manager, and then he's no longer there. So, and you bring in, what they did was they brought in a manager who plays a completely different style of football in Jose Mourinho. So any club that always happens. It's like the oldest certainty in football, really, that if you build a squad of players for one manager and then you change the manager to somebody who plays a completely different style of football, half that team is going to adjust to it and half that team isn't, and they're going to adjust to it on different time scales, and it's just not going to work, certainly in the short term. And it was actually amazing that Mourinho had the impact that he did early on, and actually Spurs did as well as they did because that was the case. So and Ndombele clearly wasn't a Mourinho player, although he did try to make him one. Yeah. Same with Lo Celso. I think Sessegnon has been really unfortunate with his injuries and his fitness. That's really the thing for Ryan. He's been, really felt for him that he's got fit and he's come back, and then he's been in the team, and you think, okay, now it's going to be his time, and then he's just fallen down again with a problem. And then I think that's happened sort of 2 or 3 times under various managers. And it's just really, really unfortunate for him. So again, we're here in a transfer window on the podcast talking about him needing to go out and play regularly. And listen, at this time, at this moment, as I sit here, I actually think he's more likely to stay than go anywhere at this point. I understand that Ange, wants him to stay actually, and wants to have a proper look at him and see if he can get some game time out of him and see if he can fit with what they want to do. So, because obviously I think that there's a huge question mark over how Ryan could fit into what Ange wants to do, because he just hasn't been able to see him enough properly in where he needs to see him, which is playing in games. So it's a shame Spurs aren't also in the FA Cup still as well. Because he might have used him a little bit there as well.
Yeah, sore point for me and Matty. We're still recovering.
Is it?
Yeah. Well, I just, again, you look at that. I think the ultimate frustration, to go back into it, because I think me and Matt are just getting over it, is, I mean, we just didn't really lay a glove on City. That's the frustration. That again, there was. I thought the same thing. Yeah, and you know what, Lyall, for all the build-up of everyone saying what an amazing game that was going to be, and when you look back at it now, City do this to a lot of teams. They just suffocate the opponent internally, and you realise.
I know it's hard for you guys to
the quality
lay the
difference
praise on City, but they were very.
They were. And again, I look at the benches with no disrespect. I know Maddison came on. We could clearly see Maddison wasn't fit. I mean, we're bringing on Dan Scarlett. They're bringing on Jeremy Doku. with all due respect, De Bruyne is coming on. I mean, it's hopefully we're going to get there at some point. We do. I do need to ask you about one thing, Lyall. When I asked Bridgie about it last night, and again, I mean, at the moment, I know many don't really want to go into this subject because we don't want to.
About to tell people who Bridgie is. Maybe they don't know him by Bridgie. You and I know him as Bridgie, but
well, Michael Bridge. Listen, the Spurs fans know him as Bridgie, of course, but the legendary Michael Bridge. Ange Postecoglou, just in relation to his future, which sounds weird, me even starting a question with that. I mean, look, not going to last with Liverpool here, but I mean, look, the last week or so about Liverpool and the fact Klopp departing, I think has sent fairly shockwaves around the footballing world because many just wasn't really seeing it coming. And of course, there's going to be a vacant post for that job. And he's performing really, really well. I don't want to start anything here needlessly, but again, there's been admittance from Ange that he's been a Liverpool fan as a child. I mean, do you feel confident by the fact that what Spurs are building here, that he wouldn't be tempted if an offer came in for Liverpool because of the fact he could be building something very, very special at Spurs? That I always believe this with Tottenham, that I think you could really achieve anything you want to at the likes of Liverpool, City, those kind of clubs. But to win at Spurs, a club that you've covered so long, Lyall, and we've discussed it so often about Tottenham, that if to win at Spurs, I think would be remarkably special. And I said that about when Mourinho was here, when Conte was here, when Nuno was here briefly. I mean, would you be fairly confident if an offer came in the summer, if Postecoglou was offered that job, he'd look at Tottenham and think, do you know what? I'm building something special here. I want to remain loyal to the fact this club gave me the opportunity to manage in the Premier League. Or in football, do you still expect the unexpected, even with the managers that you maybe would expect to turn down jobs?
Look, it's pure speculation at this point. Who's going to be the next manager of Liverpool? Yeah, people putting two and two together and,
of course,
making Ange just because he said that he was a Liverpool fan when he was a kid. That doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that he's going to end up the Liverpool manager. He didn't say I've always wanted to manage Liverpool. He just said that he was a manager. It just supported him as a kid, and people's affiliations for teams change, and also they especially change when you work in football. A lot of football players will tell you that. I mean, Jamie Gallagher, I'm sure, will tell you that, right? That he grew up an Everton fan and played for Liverpool. So, these things are never clear cut. And the thing about the Liverpool managers at this point is there is just so much that needs to happen at Liverpool before they decide on who their new manager is going to be. The FSG, the owners, have been put in a really difficult position, I think, now, because everybody's leaving. The whole operation is leaving. The whole technical operation that has been the source of Liverpool's success over the last few years are all leaving. And so they need to bring in a whole new regime there, a new head coach or manager or a new sporting director, new technical staff. So, who that's going to be and who they choose is going to be down to FSG. And they're going to go through a pretty rigorous process over the next, what's it going to be, 4 or 5 months to choose who that next person is. So, there was no indications that it's going to be Ange, just like there's no indications over who it's going to be at this point. Who they set on. It could be anyone. We just don't know which route they're going to go down. I mean, they might go down a route of, we need to bring in somebody who can win now. So they might go, down the route of an established manager who's already won trophies at the top level. There's
a Mourinho.
Well, Antonio Conte is available as well, right? I'm not sure whether Mourinho would be the right one, but Antonio Conte is available, or you've got Zidane, or you've got all these people like that, big names, right? That they could go down that route. The star manager who's going to play, try and play winning football now and want to sign top players, or they might go down another. Let's start a new project. Let's start a new sort of cycle, and you just don't know. It's just pure speculation what they're going to decide to do. And they've got to go through a process of having those conversations with people and making a decision on what they do. I mean, I think the status of the current squad will also be quite important as well, won't they? I mean, obviously, given there are players who are near the end of the contracts and things like that. So, yeah, look, I don't think that anybody needs to be worrying about Liverpool and Ange Postecoglou at this stage. Certainly not.
Lyall, thanks for the reassurance. Just one final one before Matt comes back in. The fact that Van Dijk's already come out, and I will again timestamp this, we're recording here on Monday evening, 29th of January. He said he's unsure if he can commit his future to the club. Do you feel this is a genuine opportunity going into the summer that Spurs, I won't say you would overtake Liverpool, but be in a position where they could really maybe capitalise on the fact that it could be a transitional season coming up for Liverpool, maybe.
Well, I don't know if you remember. I will leave this as my parting shot, shall I? I don't know if you remember last year. I think I said it on this podcast at least once, that in their discussions with players and managers and potential sporting directors or technical directors they ended up bringing in, that what I was hearing is that Spurs were telling prospective new signings and staff members that they see an opportunity in the next 2-3 years to establish themselves as one of, if not the top clubs. And one of the reasons for that was that they believed that the Klopp and the Guardiola cycles were starting to come to an end, which is one of the reasons for that, obviously, is because Pep Guardiola's contract was up at the end of the season by that point as well. So obviously they were looking ahead and thinking, if we're going to get to the point where City and Liverpool are going to go through their next transition phases, then it would be best for Spurs to be in a position to be able to exploit that. So, I'm sure that's no doubt part of the thinking at the moment. And if I was in charge of Tottenham, I would be looking at Klopp's departure and rubbing my hands and thinking, okay, this should be working in our favour, because you look around the other top clubs over the last, sort of 5-10 years or more, and what's happened when a manager the size of Klopp and this, you're looking at Ferguson leaving Man United and Wenger leaving Arsenal as the sort of nearest equivalents, aren't you, to that kind of a departure? It's taken a good amount of time, a few years, for the clubs to readjust and find the right person. And, so I think there's a big question mark hanging over the future of Liverpool now. And I think that was alluded to in as you started your question with what Van Dijk said as well. He said this is the words that he said. He said they've got a big job on their hands. I think that's absolutely true.
Let's bring the show back to Spurs and to close on a question that no one will get any prizes for guessing. It's changed since we last spoke to you about this. Spurs have been, of course, knocked out of the FA Cup. Sorry, Ricky. So I'm interested to hear, has your, I suppose, opinion on what would constitute success for Tottenham this season, has that changed?
Because of what?
Getting knocked out of the FA Cup. Just make me say it again. Want to rub it in? Is that it?
No, listen. I think for Tottenham at the start of the season, it was how much progress can we make in the first season with a new manager and some new players, and the progress was very swift and quite considerable very quickly. So I think that's become, how high can we finish in the table? Can we get in the Champions League places? And I think, that's definitely what I know is part of the reason why they did look to make sure that they did some stuff in this window was, right, let's do all we can to make sure we get in there. And I think that, listen, I may end up looking stupid, but this is purely my opinion based on what I've seen and how these things tend to go, is that the Klopp's announcement is surely going to have an effect on Liverpool and an effect on the team. And I know they will hope that it will have some sort of a galvanizing effect, and it obviously remains to be seen. But again, if I was Spurs, I'd be looking at that thinking, well, let's hope that actually it has an impact on them negatively for the rest of the season and impacts their results and throws open the possibility of finishing above them. Spurs have a great chance to get in finishing the Champions League spaces. So no, I don't think my opinion of what constitutes a successful season has changed. I think a Champions League spot would be a big success for Spurs and in their first season, and it would lift them up to a place where they can kick on again quite quickly next year. And especially in the transfer market in summer, it gets them to a point, right? Okay, we could kick on with Champions League football to offer people.
Yeah. We've had the pleasure of having you on here for the last 7-8 years, but I think the summer, when we had you on that period where they didn't have a manager and Harry Kane's future was up in the air, had anyone said to you or said to us, we'd be sitting here end of the January window saying Spurs are potentially in the midst of the top four. And again, I know they're 8 points off top, but the next 4 out of the next 5 are at home. Who knows what can happen in the league? We mentioned the fact about Liverpool and the situation around Klopp. Obviously, in football, we say that expect the unexpected. So, look, mate, I've got to say, it's always a pleasure having you on here. Given the fact of the way tonight started with the Nusa news, and just to bring everybody up to date, only from what we're hearing reportedly, and Lyall can add anything he wants to on this, is that we are hearing some news coming through that Nusa has moved to Brentford. Reportedly, he's almost certainly off. The reason down to that is due to a knee and back issues during the medical. It's understood the knee issue is potentially quite serious. That's all that's being reported. I'm sure Lyall will have more clarity on that from a Sky Sports perspective. But it does leave it in a situation where any potential move could go to the deadline, which I'm sure many people want, because we all love deadline day news. We all love last minute dramas, and that's potentially what that move could be set up to be. But again, can't get away from the fact that if it's a medical issue, that is a bit of an issue. So I guess Lyall, you'll tell us to keep strapped into Sky Sports and see how that day pans out, right?
Exactly that.
Absolutely that. Amazing. Lyall, where can we find you? It will be a busy few days for you, I'm sure. Where can we find the latest news? Sky Sports Lyall there. Can I say for our listeners and audio, Lyall is pointing.
Yeah, if you're on X, call it X.com now, haven't we, really, and start giving it its real name. X, formerly known as Twitter, as people call it now. Or obviously Sky Sports News as well. Yeah, and online, skysports.com, mobile, tablet apps. Get on the transfer centre. That's where everything is.
Amazing. Lyall, as always, we will be glued on deadline day, because we always know there's always late business and anything can happen, as this show has proved. 5 minutes before coming on, keep your eyes peeled. Look, from myself, from Matt, and I've got to say, from Matt, can I just say very quickly, it is our final transfer show of this window, so we always want to bow out with the wonderful Lyall Thomas. And can I just say, for Matty Hayes, Matt has been with me since the 1st of January. I think we've both aged this month 100% by doing these shows, and it's not often, Matt. It's only right I come to you very quickly, Matt, because Spurs did go early this.
I thought you died there, actually, Nicky, to be honest. I was looking.
Mate, it's the two kids, not the January window. I could rival it, Spurs, I will tell you. But Matt, thank you so much. I know it's been an interesting window, and one that Spurs went early, Matt. So just a massive thank you to you, mate. And been an absolute pleasure having you on here, Matt. Really appreciate it.
No, thank you so much for having me, Ricky. I enjoy these shows so much. There's no other walk of life I get to have regular chats with the likes of Lyall and Bridgie and all the brilliant journalists we've had on this summer. So I have to thank you for allowing me to have that stage, and of course for Lyall and everyone else for joining us throughout the window. It's been a good one. It's been a fun one, and to be honest, I'm just counting down the days till the summer.
Listen, I've got to say, everyone knows the window doesn't open and close unless Lyall Thomas is on. So that tells you about our relationship that's gone back 7-8 years. It's always a pleasure. We always push the man for more. But listen, the good thing is Spurs did go early. We'll see what the next few days bring from myself, from Matt, from the wonderful Lyall Thomas. Guys, thank you so much for all your incredible support as always. We'll be back with you very, very soon. Brentford on the horizon.